better not say that. This is the Canadian Android podcast, episode 1. I'm here with my friend Harold. He's an actor in Toronto, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, do you want to talk about my history as an actor, or what would you
Uh,
like to know?
yeah, we could. Yeah, let's start with the acting stuff. Mm.
Okay, well, it's interesting because many, many years ago, back in the 1970s, when I was a young man, I was really interested in acting, and I took a whole bunch of acting classes, and I actually got accepted by Ryerson Theatre School back in 1975, but I ended up not going for a variety of reasons. Personal reasons, but also I think just because I didn't have the self confidence at the time
Ah,
to really see it through.
ah,
So I think the last acting class I took in those days was in 1978, and then I didn't do anything with acting until 3 years ago. Um, the
mm,
there's a friend of mine who's a wonderful choreographer named Kathleen Ray, and she was creating a new dance theater piece
mm.
called Men's Circle, which was a piece about a men's therapy group. And one day in the summer, they were doing a rehearsal, last rehearsal before taking the summer off. They were short one dancer, so she put out an
Ah,
email
okay.
asking if there
Ah,
was anybody available to uh, to come. And I happened to be free that day. Our fire alarm's going off.
oh
Don't worry
no. Oh, it's okay. Don't
about
worry about it.
it. So I happened to be free that day, and I showed up and walked
Mm.
through uh, the dancer's role. And then the guy who was playing the therapist came, and it was
Ah,
his first walkthrough through the part as well.
mm.
And when he left, I had been telling Kathleen that I'd been a member of a men's group for 25 years at that point. We
Ah,
had just met the night before, and she looked at me and she said, Harold, I don't think he felt quite right for the part. Would you be
mm.
willing to walk through the part? So I did, and she offered me the part. So that's how
Oh,
I
nice.
got back into acting
Mm.
after almost 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Uh, so, and after that, I
Mm.
started auditioning for plays and for student
Mm.
films. And, gradually over the last few years, I've been getting more parts.
Ah,
Until this coronavirus thing hit,
mm.
I had parts in a play in the New Ideas Festival,
Mm.
which got canceled the week before opening, and a play in the Hamilton Fringe. I
Ah,
have parts lined up in 3 or 4 films.
ah.
And of course, everything has been the plays were canceled,
Mm.
the films have been either canceled or delayed. Although that seems to be actually getting going again. I did a read through of the small
Oh,
part I have
okay.
in a short horror
Ah,
film they're planning to
mm.
film uh, towards the end of the summer.
Oh,
And
okay.
probably by
Ah,
that time, I think,
mm.
certainly film will be getting going again. I don't think theater
Mm.
will be going yet. So that's
Yeah,
sort
it's
of my
hard to
history
say.
as an
Mm.
actor. The neatest thing that
Mm.
happened to me recently was
Mm.
in January. Um, I did some background work as well,
Ah,
and I got a background role in a CBS miniseries called, based on James Comey's book, A Higher Loyalty,
ah,
playing the head of some security agency that I've forgotten the name of. The guy's name was
ah,
Michael
okay.
Edgers.
Oh,
And
nice.
the dream of every background
Mm.
performer is to get what they call an upgrade, where
Ah,
you get a speaking line and you end up
yeah.
getting
Mm.
co-star credit.
Mm.
And so it was a 4 day shoot.
Ah,
I was involved for 4 days, and on the last day, we'd been working pretty hard all day. And I can't tell you what the scenes are because there's all this secrecy
ah,
around it. But I can
yeah.
tell you that one of the other actors in this miniseries is an actor named Jonathan Banks, who's
Ah,
in Better Call Saul. And
okay. Mm.
uh, anyway,
Mm.
towards the end of the day, he turned to the director and said,
Mm.
"Why don't you give Harold a line? He's been sitting here all day."
Mm.
So sure enough,
Huh.
they upgraded me. So I got a speaking line in CBS miniseries.
Oh, nice. Huh.
Yeah,
Huh. Um, what was the series called again?
higher loyalty.
Higher Loyalty.
So I'm
Um,
not
I'll,
sure.
I'll have to check
Sorry,
it out.
yeah,
Mm.
they were intending to release it in the
Mm.
fall, before the election because it deals with Comey's relationship with Trump.
Yeah. Mm.
I don't know how much this COVID-19 has affected post-production, so I'm not sure if it will be delayed or not. But I imagine they're really hoping to get it out at that point because it'll be just before the election.
Huh. That's interesting. Huh. And you were working on that for 4 days?
Yeah, that was I mean the guy playing James Comey was Jeff Daniels. He's a wonderful actor. So it was I really enjoyed meeting them, and because I got upgraded on the last day, I got to hang out with the actors as well and had a really nice conversation with James Comey, with Jeff Daniels, who's also a musician. And
nice.
I'm a amateur singer-songwriter, so we got talking about music. And it's interesting what he said. He was on a show called The Newsroom. In the early, 2012 or something like that. And he said that series actually saved his career. He said before that he wasn't really getting much work, and he was thinking he was probably going to spend the rest of his career as a musician. But he said since The Newsroom, he's been the busiest he's ever been in his whole career.
Yeah, I never know when lightning's gonna strike.
That's right.
Could happen any time. How long have you been singing and songwriting?
I wrote my first song in 1971.
Oh wow!
So a long time. I've written some 200 songs over the years.
Wow. Huh.
And obviously, that's one of the things I talked with Jeff Daniels about. He said, I think he said he'd written something like 400 songs, and he said maybe 50 of them are any good. And that's sort of the way it is. I think I've got about maybe 30 of my songs that I think are really good. So it's I'm working on a new song right now. I haven't written one for a few years, but I have the lyrics for a song, and I'm having trouble coming up with the melody.
What kind of music do you usually write?
Well, it's sort of in the general folk kind of genres, Gordon Lightfoot, that kind of thing. Although I try to do quite a variety of stuff. I've got a country song and some bluesier kind of stuff. I've written a few songs that I call vaguely spiritual. I'm not religious, but I consider myself to be a spiritual atheist.
What do you mean by that? You believe in some kind of higher power or something, or?
I don't really. I think it's more based on experiences. I've had a few experiences in my life where I just feel this incredibly deep connection with everything, where everything feels perfect just the way it is. I meditate, so there's a part of my life that tries to get present, I've been meditating more actually since I started this just before this coronavirus thing started. So, I meditate in 10-minute chunks, but I used to do just 10 minutes a day, and now I'm doing it in 10-minute chunks throughout the day. So I'm probably meditating about an hour a day, and that's really made a huge difference in my mood and my energy, and just being able to be productive. And I've been really trying to be productive during this time, where I'm mostly at home. So every day I do dance exercises. I do a workout. I go for a walk. I go for a run. I work on monologues. I have 3 self-tapes, maybe 4 if this self-tapes to do in the next few weeks. People are starting to put out audition notices again, with the proviso that the shooting won't take place until it's safe to do so, or the procedures are in place to do it safely. So what I'm doing one for a low-budget feature film that I have
Oh.
to finish this week.
Mm.
They've mostly finished shooting the film. They just
Mm.
have, I think, one day more of shooting to do with some
Mm.
small roles, speaking roles, but just small roles. So I'd only be there for a day if I get the part. And
Mm.
then the Crow's Nest Theater, which is a theater in the east part of the city, put out a
Ah.
notice some weeks ago saying, this is a good time for us to see if we can find some new faces. So
Mm.
they're looking for a modern and a classical monologue, and also,
Mm.
asking to talk about if you're involved in any projects. So this has got me to be working on my first classical monologue since the 1970s. So I'm
Ah.
working on a monologue from Othello, from Iago, the villain of the piece, of
Mm.
course, which starts, "I hate the Moor."
Ah.
It's a wonderful speech. I'm having a lot of fun working on it. But I'm also rehearsing for a dance theater piece that
Ah.
my friend Carlin and I have been rehearsing since last summer. She has written a piece and is choreographing it with some input from me.
Mm.
That's about two seniors who meet in a cemetery visiting their departed spouses and then very tentatively start exploring a relationship. So it's going to consist of probably about half an hour of dialogue, so acting, but also probably it'll be about 20 minutes of dance. So, I'm
Mm.
discovering, well, first of all, it's really challenging. I
Ah.
did some modern dance training
Mm.
also back in the 1970s, and I've done a form of dance called contact improvisation for some time and have done some studying of that over the last, it's only been 20 years, I think. But we're doing some pretty wild stuff,
Mm.
lifts, and we just tried this thing um, where I end up lifting her over first on my shoulder,
Huh.
and then I bring her to my front, and she wraps her legs around me. She's leaning forward like this, and then she puts her you know her hands on my hands and sort of shoots forward. Are we one of the things we did before we started rehearsing again this week, for a few weeks we would get together, we would just phone a few times a week and watch videos of
Mm.
dancers doing professional dancers doing various things. And this was from this fabulous dance company in the Netherlands, Netherlands Dance
Mm.
Theater. And they've been putting, a lot of theater companies have been putting out free videos on the internet, and they've been
Mm.
putting out a free video every week of some of their dances. And it's been really an education watching what these people can do.
Huh.
And much to our amazement,
Mm.
or certainly much to my amazement, we could actually do this really
Yeah.
fabulous move.
Huh.
So, we were originally planning to perform that in the fall sometime. I think it's going to be quite a while before people will feel comfortable going to live theater.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm thinking we'll probably do it sometime next year.
Mm.
But we're also planning to film it, so
Oh
we might
wow.
film it
Huh.
earlier.
How do you keep like all the different lines and the from the different projects you're doing? Like, how do you keep them all in mind and separated and not like jumble them all up and stuff? Like, do you have any tips or anything? Or
Well,
mm.
I mean, I tend to learn them one at a
Mm.
time, but
Ah.
it's like the other monologue that I'm doing for
Mm.
Crow's Nest is one that I've done
Mm.
before. I had to take a few lines out because they wanted limited to a minute and a half, and I think
Yeah.
it was a little bit longer than that. Um, but part of it is you're the character, right?
Mm.
So if I'm the character from the play Red, which is where this monologue is from,
Ah.
Mark Rothko, abstract artist in the
Mm.
1950s, I'm obviously really, you know, you inhabit the
Mm.
role, so it's very different from Iago from Othello.
Ah.
One of the things that I do when I memorize dialogue is I record the dialogue of the other. If it's a play, for example, I record
Mm.
the dialogue of all the other characters as well, and then I just blank out my dialogue so that I can play it, and then not only do I learn, I'm learning the dialogue, my
Mm.
dialogue, but I know when I'm supposed to say what because I'm getting the cues from the other characters.
Yeah.
Uh, but memorizing is a skill like any other.
Mm.
Really, I found that over the last 3 years, I've gotten much better at it. I can do it faster. Uh, you know, and one of the things I've been doing in this coronavirus time
Mm.
is to do some studying on the
Yeah.
internet as well. Um, there's an acting teacher in Beverly Hills who's doing a free lecture every week. He runs a place called the
Mm.
Beverly Hills Playhouse, and I like his approach to acting. But I'm also, among my many other projects is I try to do a little bit of French and a little bit of
Yeah.
German every day, and I've discovered a German and a French YouTube
Mm.
channel that are about acting. So I watch
Yeah.
those, and they have,
Mm.
I just watched one actually, a German one that had all sorts of
Yeah.
hints on how to memorize dialogue and different approaches that you could use.
Huh. Have you ever done any acting in other languages or in German or?
No, but
Uh,
that's one of the things that I would like to do.
mm.
One of I when this coronavirus thing started, and I thought I don't know
Mm.
how long this is going to take. I sort of made a
Yeah.
list of projects that I'd like to accomplish
Yeah.
during this time, and one of them is to learn a French monologue,
Mm.
and another is to learn a German monologue. So that
Yeah.
in Canada, obviously, I'm not going to get a chance to do
Mm.
any German
Yeah.
probably, unless there happens to be a role that requires it. But if I can, I don't speak French terribly
Mm.
well, but I have a fairly good accent. So if I really work on polishing up a monologue in that language, there
Mm.
are definitely auditions periodically for bilingual, often for commercials where they want somebody to be able to do it in both languages. So I figure that's a worthwhile thing for me to work on.
Sorry, we got to take a 5 minute break. My dog's wants to get out. I'll
All right.
just I'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay. Sorry,
Uh,
I just
mm.
went away for a moment. I'll
Oh,
be
no worries.
um, okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No worries. Sorry. My dog is he has a lot of energy, so he doesn't like to just sit around.
Sure.
So do you have, what other tips do you have for actors just getting into the industry?
Okay. Well,
Mm.
um, one thing I would recommend is to do some background work.
Mm.
Although, I think that's going to be harder actually after this. I
Mm.
think a lot of background work will disappear because of social distancing requirements.
Yeah.
I was in
Mm.
a
Mm.
one background gig a couple of years ago where there were 500 extras. I don't think
Oh
that's
wow.
going to happen anymore. But
Uh,
um, what that allows you to do is to get
mm.
really comfortable on set.
Mm.
You really get a sense of what actually happens on a film set,
Mm.
what the different roles are, what your, you know, you watch the director working, the director of photography, all the lighting people,
Mm.
um, so some people do that as a career doing
Mm.
background, but my ambitions are higher than that.
Huh.
It can be somewhat
Mm.
thankless work if unless you're in the union and only pays minimum wage.
Uh,
But it really is something that's that's worth doing. I have to say, I really enjoyed doing it, despite the crazy hours and stuff. Every time, every thing I was on, it was kind of like a little
Mm.
adventure. And you get to see some really top people acting. I was in Mrs. America 3 times, which has just
Mm.
been released with Kate Blanchett. So watching her work was really uh, a delight. She's a
Uh,
wonderful actress. So that's one thing I would recommend. The other thing, you know, the thing that has been clear, one of the things that I'm going to do as soon as
mm.
people start having live classes again
Yeah.
is to take more classes.
Yeah.
The the guy who is doing these lectures from the Beverly
Mm.
Hills Playhouse says, a lot of people think you can become an actor without much training.
Yeah.
And if you substitute anything else, any other profession, like say classical violinist, you can say, you know, I did a 12-week workshop. Now I'm going to be a classical violinist. It doesn't
Mm.
work that way. So he says you really to be a really skilled actor, uh, you need to do
Mm.
intensive, he says, 3 to 5 years
Mm.
of scene study. And of course, I haven't done that. And I know, I don't have any illusions right now
Mm.
about being a great actor.
Mm.
That's definitely something I want to
Mm.
do. There are people right now doing virtual classes via
Mm.
Zoom, and I audited a couple of them, but it just doesn't work for me. Uh,
Oh, okay.
the tech,
Yeah. Mm.
the technology, it's just too weird for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it works
Mm.
for this kind of conversation.
Mm.
It works for more lecture kind of things, but
Mm.
to do an interactive, working with a scene partner and stuff like
Mm.
that, it does. I didn't feel that I found it kind of exhausting watching them, and I
Mm.
saw some good work being done, but I'm going to wait until there's actually live classes again. But
Mm.
it's definitely get training. Uh, the other thing, these days, especially if you want to do film, you've got to have a
Mm.
demo reel.
Yeah.
And I just actually
Mm.
created my first demo reel a few weeks ago
Mm.
so the way, when you're just starting out, the way to get film experience is to do student films.
Mm.
There's a lot of there's a lot of film schools in Toronto, and I think there's 3 or 4 different community colleges. There's also an independent Toronto film school,
Mm.
and there's certain times of the year where all of the students are looking for actors. And I've done a
Yeah.
few student films, and
Mm.
it's fun to work with the young people. Um, and it gives
Mm.
I've learned things from doing those too. I watch myself on the screen afterwards, and the one of the things I learned is if you're in a film, I have a tendency to move my head a lot when I'm
Yeah.
talking to people.
Yeah.
You can't do that in film; it looks terrible.
Mm.
So it gives you both a chance to get some in front of the camera experience. You can they'll send you the film when it's finished, and if you've done if it looks pretty good, you can use it
Mm.
as part of a demo reel, so that when people are often for auditions for film, they'll ask for your demo
Mm.
reel. So if you have one, and having one, unless it's a bunch of crap, of course,
Yeah.
mine.
Mm.
I'm waiting for a film that I did last year, a
Mm.
horror film that has been delayed. The guy is still editing it. And there was a film I was in the 48-hour film challenge last
Ah.
year that um, the director, not director, the producer is
Mm.
still shopping around to festivals, and he won't let me have a
Oh
copy of
no.
the footage yet. But there's some footage in there that I will certainly replace some of the
Mm.
footage that I have in my reel right now.
Ah.
So
Hmm.
there's if you're interested in doing theater, there's all sorts of amateur theater in
Mm.
Toronto. um, and just going to auditions, even
Mm.
the first audition I went to, I didn't get the part. I got a
Ah.
call back, which is nice. But just like anything else, the more auditions you do, the more
Mm.
comfortable you get with them, and eventually you'll get some work. um,
Mm.
And let's see, what other advice would I have for somebody who's starting out? Um, certainly you can. There's good books available on
Mm.
acting. There's a book on auditioning by a guy named Michael Shurtleff. That's sort of the Bible for auditioning. That's a very good book. Um, and I would recommend this guy Alan Barton, who's in the Beverly Hills. His book is called The Oasis of Insanity, and it covers not just
Sounds
sort of
good.
acting skills, but also the business side of acting and how the kind of things. Now, it's got a Hollywood
Mm.
perspective, but still a lot of things that make sense. Some things that I'm going to start doing, which is
Mm.
keeping track of who I've met on various film shoots, so that I can, reconnect with them, or drop them a line sometimes, so that they know that I'm still around, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and Yeah, I mean, getting in play is good too, because you can work
Mm.
intensively
Mm.
on the same work over and over and over again
Mm.
for a period of time.
Ah.
And live theater is very in film. The neat thing about film is if you screw it up, you just do
Yeah.
another take, right? But
Mm.
for live theater, you you know
Mm.
you don't it is whatever you've done.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I mean, it's an adventure too.
Mm.
The Fringe play I was in last year, the opening night was a bit of a disaster.
Ah.
They had not turned the sound on backstage, so
Oh
we couldn't
no.
hear what was going on stage. So
Mm.
people would miss their cues because a couple of times I was sitting on stage waiting for another actor
Mm.
to show up, and nobody's coming, right? Because they couldn't hear anything backstage, and it
Mm.
was totally dark as well in the wings, which made it very difficult to find your way out if you were leaving the scene.
Yeah.
So we,
Huh.
but the second performance, they had sorted out the sound, and they had a
Oh,
bit of
that's good.
lighting in the exits, and
Huh.
it was interesting because every performance we got better,
Ah.
and the last performance we did was the best one. Yeah, and I mean the other play I was in last year was a short comedy, part of the New
Ah.
Ideas Festival,
Mm.
alumni theater.
Ah.
And comedy is really interesting because it depends
Mm.
so much on whether the audience is with you or not.
Yeah.
I think we did like 8 performances, and out
Mm.
of those 8, 4 of them we got all sorts of laughs.
Oh. Huh.
3 of them
Huh.
we got virtually no laughs at all,
Oh no.
and one of them was sort of in the middle,
Mm.
And it really makes a huge difference to it sort of fuels the performance if you've
Mm.
got the audience with you right at the beginning. uh, it improves your performance. It gives
Mm.
you energy, so I mean that was a really good learning experience too. I'd
Mm.
never been in a comedy before, and the first time we performed it, the people I didn't think it was really that funny. People
Ah.
started laughing all over the place, and
Oh.
one of the things you have to do in a comedy is if
Mm.
people start laughing, you have to pause before you continue your
Mm.
dialogue. And the first night I didn't do that
Oh
because
no.
it was a completely
Huh.
new experience for
Yeah.
me.
Huh. Yeah, you gotta wait till the laughter dies down and then keep going, I guess, so they can hear the jokes and
Yeah,
whatnot.
exactly. I mean, it's it's not real life,
Mm.
It's so then I mean,
Mm.
there's so many things with acting. You just learn by experience. So
Mm.
so I'm pretty easy on myself. If I screw
Yeah.
up, it's like okay,
Mm.
I'm just really starting out. I mean, I'm starting
Yeah.
out at a very late age, but
Mm.
it's not unheard of for people to start a career, maybe not quite as old as me in acting, but quite, as a sort of second career almost, and it's sort of what it is for me, or
Mm.
third career, really.
I forget what his name is. He played he played the bad guy in Die Hard, and he played another bad guy in the Harry Potter movies.
Oh,
But
Alan Rickman,
yeah, Alan Rickman.
wonderful
Yeah.
actor.
Mm.
Yeah,
He-
I mean, one of my fantasies
mm.
is getting the role of Snape.
Oh yeah.
If you ever do revive. Like often with
Mm.
things like that, 10 years or 15 years later, they'll do a
Mm.
remake of it. By that time, I'd probably be too old, but
Mm.
what a part that would be. And I mean, Alan Rickman, was one of the, I think, the best actors of his generation.
Oh
Just
yeah,
a
definitely.
terrific actor.
Mm.
I loved watching him.
Mm. I don't think he started acting until he was in his maybe like early 50s, I think.
Uh huh.
Um, so he also got a bit of a later start than a lot of actors. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
know in the Harry Potter
Mm.
series, he was
Mm.
playing a role where he was supposed to be about the
Mm.
same age as the actor who played Lupin,
Mm.
and and he was 20 years older than all of
Mm.
the other ones. So, so it helps to look younger than your chronological age. So
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think I do. I mean, I'm turning
Mm.
71 this month.
Mm. Yeah, you don't look 71. Mm. Do you find like there's a lot of competition with younger actors, or not really?
Um, I'm not really. I mean, the younger actors will be going for different roles than I would be
Mm.
going for anyway. Um, some people tell me that it's better to be older actually because there's a fair number of parts and there aren't as many older actors as there are
Mm.
younger ones. Inevitably all sorts of people get into the field when they're young, and it's a tough place to
Mm.
make a living, so a lot of them drop out. I mean,
Mm.
I'm in a good situation because I don't need to make a living from this. I have a Canada
Yeah.
pension and old age
Mm.
security and a small company pension. So I mean, uh, it's particularly hard for women actually because
Mm.
more women get attracted to acting than men. And there aren't as many roles for women on top of that. So, um, yeah, but
Mm.
for me, in terms of, I mean, it's interesting. What I think it was Michael Shurtleff said. An actor will get like one role for every 30 auditions or something like that.
Mm.
And I've been getting like one role for every 4 or 5 editions, maybe
Oh
even
well.
less than that. So and then it's not like big budget films or network television series, but I'm getting the roles. So
Oh,
um,
that's good. Mm.
yeah, I'm actually surprised at how often I get the part. Um,
Mm.
I mean, it's a funny business too with auditioning. Sometimes you go in there and you think you've really done a good job, and you don't get the part. And another time you'll think, well, it wasn't really that great, and you get the part anyway. So I mean, so much of it depends on what they're looking for. It's people.
Mm.
You don't want to take it too seriously if you don't get the part. Uh,
Yeah.
they may want somebody who's taller than you are, or shorter than you are,
Mm.
or you know, has a just doesn't have has a different feel, a different
Yeah.
look, a different
Mm.
voice.
Mm.
It's all sorts of criteria. So, but it's kind of an adventure, just going for an audition. And
Mm.
my favorite audition piece is from a film called Michael Clayton
Uh-huh.
with George Clooney. And it's actually a voiceover in the opening credits.
Mm.
And the first time I did it, I I could see that I had completely blown away the two people who were auditioning me. And I felt
Mm.
really good. I actually ended up getting the part, but the
Oh,
film never
nice.
got made.
Oh no. Oh, what happened to the film? They
I think they ran into some kind of personal
mm.
problems, and then they made a second attempt to get the cast together again, and then nothing came of it. I mean, this is one
Yeah.
thing you also have to
Mm.
expect, especially with film. Projects, get started and don't get finished.
Mm.
I was in a student film
Mm.
last year that you know a couple of months ago,
Mm.
she said, I've run out of money. I can't finish this thing. So she sent what footage she had, and I have a feeling she may have just abandoned it because the footage just wasn't that great either.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the cases where I noticed that I was moving my head way too much in one of the scenes. It was also a film that involved child actors, and
uh,
a couple of the kids were sort of overacting and stuff.
uh,
So I think she made, I don't know, I don't have any idea why she, you know, what the reason was. She said it was financial, so that could well be. But that was it was fun working with kids. It was a horror thing too. I ended
oh,
up getting
nice.
killed by one of the kids. It's a Halloween film.
Oh, sounds like it would have been a really good film.
Yeah.
Mm,
Now one of the things you really have to get used to with film is the crazy hours.
yeah.
Now, according to what I've been reading about how this pandemic is going to affect the film industry, that may get better actually. But you know, I've been on sets where we started. Well, there was one for Handmaid's Tale. We started. My call time was 4 in the morning,
Mm.
and we finished at 8 o'clock at night. So
Oh, wow.
that's like 16 hours.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
And that's probably, I think, the longest. But you know, I remember one of the Mrs. America ones. We started at 3 in the afternoon and finished at 3 in the morning. So
Uh,
often you will either have to get up at some ungodly hour, although 4 o'clock was the earliest call time that I ever had. But often it'll be like 5:30, 6 a.m. Or you work well into the night. I think I worked till 4 a.m. one of the background gigs as well. So, and it's stupid. I mean, they, because as the day progresses, usually things get slower and slower because people are getting tired. You
oh,
know?
yeah.
So I'm actually hoping that changes as a result of this, that they shorten the hours somewhat.
Yeah, that'd be nicer to have a bit shorter hours
Yeah. I mean, when I watch a film now, I try to see how tired the extras look.
oh, yeah.
You know, it's like 3 in the morning, and you're supposed to be, you know, lively at a party or something like that, chatting silently with people. Because as background, usually you're just mouthing the words. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to make any noise, right? But it's kind of fun. You know, that's the other thing with background. It's kind of fun spotting yourself in the film
Uh,
because you know, obviously you hope that you end up in the film. I actually made the trailer of the film Shazam.
oh, yeah, I remember that. I saw that.
Yeah.
Um, how was it filming that?
Well, that was really fun. That was a subway scene.
Uh,
So Toronto, the Bay Street subway station has a second station that's underneath
mm,
the one they're using now. They used to use it until somewhere in the 1960s. It was a part of a scheduling kind of thing, but then they stopped using it. So whenever a film needs a subway station scene, they film it down there. So,
okay.
so you know and they you know they have trains coming in. It was supposed to be in Philadelphia, so all the advertising in the trains was about Philadelphia related stuff. So I mean the other thing that happens when you're on set is you got to get lucky if you're a background. So so you know at one point I would you know the other thing that happens with film is you spend a lot of time sitting around waiting. You know, there's been times where there was one time on Higher Loyalty where my call time was noon, and I didn't get on set until 6 o'clock in the 6 in the evening.
Wow.
And that happened to me more than once. That kind of really lengthy wait. But you know, for this Shazam, they were setting up for the next take, and one of the assistant directors came and said, "We need a bunch of people to be a group of people at the top of the stairs of the escalator that the kid's going to have to fight his way through." He said, you, and you. So I happened to be one of the ones he
Oh,
picked,
nice.
and that's how I ended up being in the trailer because that little scene got into the trailer of Shazam. And that was sort of the good part of the day. After that, I spent the rest of the day sitting in the subway car, and they didn't use me for anything else. But you know, you get paid for it, so you know, the other thing I recommend for film is that you take along a good book.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, a lot of people obviously are reading stuff on their phone and stuff like that, but what I would do actually, what I often did was
Yeah.
take along monologues that I was working on or
Mm,
scripts for other things that I was involved in and
mm,
work on my lines while I was waiting around. So, that was a pretty good use of my time. And actually, one of the things I found strange about doing background was this business of mouthing the words.
uh,
When you, so what I started to do was to mouth the monologue. So I was
uh,
actually saying something, and that made
yeah.
a huge difference in terms of making it believable,
Uh,
because I wasn't just sort of, you know,
yeah.
how are
Not
you?
just moving your mouth.
Yeah, not just moving my mouth. And
Mm,
then I would get the other
uh,
background people really engaged too, because
uh,
they couldn't, obviously they didn't know what I was saying, but they could tell that I was communicating something.
mm. Huh. Sounds like you get everyone energized, and it people put more effort in, like, and that'll show in your work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I try to
Mm,
do the best job that I can,
mm,
and whatever situation I find myself in, and certainly, and that made the background experience more vivid for me
mm,
and more enjoyable too, because
uh,
I was really acting then, and
mm.
um, so yeah, yeah, it made it more fun.
Sounds like it was a really good time when you were filming it.
Yeah, yeah, that was. There's a television series, let
Mm.
me think, called The Boys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the episodes there.
Yeah.
I'm I'm readily
Mm,
spottable, uh, talking
mm.
in that kind of animated way with somebody just behind the
Yeah.
start, and it
Yeah.
looked really good on screen.
Yeah. I saw that series. It's really good. It's on Amazon, I think. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
I remember the scene that you were in. It's there. It was like a flashback, and
yes, that's
they
right.
were having dancing and martinis and stuff, and
Yeah, it was a big
mm,
big company party of
mm,
some sort.
yeah, mm,
Yeah,
that was a
yeah.
really
So
good show.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was, and I really enjoyed
Yeah,
being. I was
mm,
in on that one 3 times as well.
mm,
And sometimes you get to dress up.
yeah,
There's a show that hasn't been released yet called Jupiter's Legacy,
yeah.
and the scene I was in for that one was a 1929 jazz club scene.
Oh wow. Huh,
So I got
huh,
to wear a tuxedo
mm,
and a little pencil thin mustache,
uh,
slick back hair, and the women were all
uh,
wearing these fabulous flapper dresses, and the
uh,
hair.
mm.
The costume people did a fabulous job on that
Oh
show.
nice.
Yeah, and
Um, I remember you were telling me you were playing a famous person in that.
no, that was in Higher Loyalty.
Oh, okay.
The guy
Uh,
named Mike Rogers, head of the NSA, the National Security Agency.
oh, okay. It was just because of the mustache that had the Salvador.
Well, that was another film. That was
Oh, okay.
the Umbrella Children.
Mm.
They had hired me as a background to be a Salvador Dali lookalike.
Oh, the Umbrella Academy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm.
yeah. And when I got
Mm.
there at 5:30 in the
Mm.
morning, they didn't have a mustache for Salvador.
Oh no.
I, I said, "You've got to be kidding me! You can't be Salvador Dali without a mustache."
Yeah, he's got to have it.
But somebody screwed up, and so I got a wig but no mustache.
Oh no.
But again, that was
Mm.
a good experience. I got
Mm.
to watch Combe Fior work,
Uh,
who's one of
mm.
Canada's top actors,
Uh,
and he's a really nice guy too. He was,
mm.
giving uh, tips to some of the other background people where to
Yeah.
stand so that they would be in the proper lighting and stuff like
Mm.
that. Really, very professional.
Mm.
Really knew his lines uh, and performed well. But he was also really generous
Mm.
with the people around. So
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
Mm.
Now some of these really big name actors do blow their
Uh,
lines sometimes,
oh yeah.
especially as you get towards the end of the day. the one of the scenes from Mrs. America, Kate Blanchett was making a
Mm.
speech, and she was
Mm.
supposed to introduce her 6 children as part of
Oh
the
no.
speech, and she kept forgetting their names. But that was at midnight, and she'd been working since God knows how early in the day.
I don't know. It might be more realism than forgetting the names.
Yeah.
um, what? I forgot what I was going to ask actually. Um, do you have any projects coming up soon, or?
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, there's two films that
mm,
I think will both get filmed at the end of the
mm.
summer. They're both horror films, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I just have very small
Mm,
roles. In one of them, I
mm.
basically place the father of somebody
Yeah.
who's been some evil presence that has
Mm,
essentially sucked his soul out of him or something like that.
mm,
Uh, which, again, it should be fun to do that. Um, there, oh yeah, actually, I'll probably be doing like a radio play during this time right now.
mm,
The guy who directed me in the Fringe last summer, he was going to direct me in the Hamilton Fringe this year. He's written
mm,
a really good play that really I will be performing in eventually. He actually wrote the part for me,
mm.
which was really a high honor. Um, but he's planning to do like either a radio play with a bunch of actors or a reading
Yeah.
of the play we did in the Fringe last summer plus its sequel,
Huh.
which were both written by a friend of his. So that should be happening over the next mm, I don't know month or 6 weeks or something like that.
Seen a lot of.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, actually, and I just got this notice for this self tape for
Mm,
an audition,
mm,
and I had sent
mm.
an email to the agent saying, "Can you tell me anything that's about what this is about?" Because I didn't know anything about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, I have submitted you to this. Here's the
Mm,
information." So I didn't get a chance to read it very thoroughly, but
mm.
that's you know I've got it. I'm even auditioning for a role for a film that's going to be made in Atlanta.
Oh,
Some,
nice.
there's a
Yeah.
certain, actually, that's another piece of advice that I can give people who are starting out. One of the things I do almost every day is check a certain number of websites and Facebook pages that
Mm,
post auditions, especially ones for people. Once you're really established as an actor, you have an agent, and
yeah.
they do a lot of the work of getting you parts. But
Mm,
before that, you really need to do the work yourself.
mm,
So, I mean, I just did a search on Toronto auditions, and a whole bunch of
mm,
things pop up, and I think I've got about 8 or 9 of them that I check.
mm.
There's some overlap in them, but and there's one called Mandy where um, to get access to the things like student films, it doesn't cost anything. To
Ah,
get access to the what they call jobs, which pay,
mm.
uh, you need to pay an annual fee. Uh, but I think they have a seniors rate, so I get to pay less than other people. Um, but and Mandy is that's the one to look for student films. Almost all of the
Mm,
students will post a notice in the opportunities section of Mandy for their films for who they're looking for. So
mm.
definitely, I would recommend joining, at least getting a free membership in Mandy
Oh,
if you're just
okay.
starting out.
Oh. Yeah, I have a lot of well, you're one of my actor friends. I have a lot of actor friends and actress friends around Toronto, and they're always asking, "Oh, how do you like find a agent, or how do you find parts and auditions and stuff?" And I just told them what you told me before, and just go on Facebook and look for the Facebook groups and stuff. Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
yeah. I mean, just going back to this Atlanta thing,
mm,
that was on one of the Facebook pages, and I thought, why
mm,
are they looking for actors in
uh,
Canada? I thought, what the hell?
mm,
I'll send them, you know, I sent them my headshot
uh,
and my resume and my demo reel, and you know, they asked which role that I was interested in, and I said,
mm,
you know, this is the one, but you know, any role that's sort of age appropriate is, you know, I'd be interested in too. So they want me to actually do a self tape, just a few lines of dialogue for Prime Minister Gladstone from the Victorian era. So I have to develop a British accent before. Fortunately, that's the last of the self tapes that I have to do in the next few
yeah.
weeks. So I'm going to get the other ones done first,
Mm,
and then you know that's a, you know, another really great resource. I mean, we're so fortunate in this day and age to it's so easy to get information. You know, I auditioned for a role some time ago where they wanted a
mm.
Swedish accent, and I
Oh
found
wow. Huh.
a 2 or 3 YouTube videos giving you the essence of what you needed to
Mm,
do to get a Swedish accent. And I think I've done it with one other accent too. Uh, so, you know, the information is there, really easy to
mm,
get. And I did a pretty creditable job of doing a Swedish accent.
uh,
So, you know, that's what I'm going to do to, you know, I'm going to look for, there's apparently the, there's obviously there's different British accents as well, but
mm.
I'm going to go for the BBC accent. That's sort of
Okay.
the,
Yeah.
it has some other name for it as well, but a lot of people refer to it as the BBC accent. Because I don't want to be you know, obviously as a Prime Minister Gladstone, you're not going to do a Cockney accent or
Yeah.
something like
Mm.
that, right?
They get really mad over there if you do like a Manchester accent, but your character's from like Leeds or somewhere.
Yeah.
I've heard they get upset greatly if a major actor mixes up the accents.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that happens. There's the same as in German. Actually,
Mm,
I mean, one of my fantasies is actually getting a role in a German-speaking film
mm,
someday. There's one German series that they filmed some of their episodes in New England.
yeah,
Uh, so, but you know, I'm long ways away from
mm,
being well known enough to
mm,
submit to something like that. But you know, the, I had to learn. You know, I would have to learn to change. Like I was born in Germany, but I would come from a lower class background in the city of
yeah,
Hamburg, and there's
mm,
certain things that lower class people in Hamburg do.
mm,
It makes it obvious that they're lower class people from
mm.
Hamburg. So I've been working on eliminating that from my German speech.
Yeah, I think I have a bit of that going on with English. A bit of a. Some people told me I speak slowly like a rural person, so
Yeah,
sometimes I try and speed it up and be more energetic.
yeah. Now again, as an
Mm,
actor, that could
mm,
stand you in really good stead depending
mm,
on the role. You know,
mm,
the, that kind of presence, that kind of
mm,
slow,
mm,
methodical kind of presence is very
mm,
appropriate for certain kind of
mm.
roles. And
I'll have to see if I can get more parts or something, and see if I can. Oh, the other thing I've been trying out lately is I've been looking for like parts doing voice acting and stuff as well.
mhm.
Mm. Um,
Now there, you know, there's some voice acting work around right now, but
mm,
generally they require you to have like a home studio.
ah,
Um,
mm,
so, you know, I have a digital recorder that does quite a good
ah,
job. I live close to the Danforth, so there's street
mm,
noises and stuff like that. So I can't do a professional job.
mm,
Um, you know, I got a call back on a voice um, audition that I did a
mm,
couple of years ago that, but I didn't get the part.
ah, mm,
It's something I'd love to do. I think I have a pretty good voice, but you can't do everything. And I don't have the money to set up, or, you know, I live in a rooming house, so I don't have the
ah,
space
yeah.
either to
Mm,
set up a home studio. I
mm.
certainly don't have the money either.
Um, Yeah, the mics and stuff are really expensive, and then you gotta have like a computer and whole setup.
Yeah, a really sophisticated computer, and
Mm.
I mean, I used to be a computer programmer for many years, but uh, I don't really want to spend a lot of my time with technology either. You know, I mean, the fortunately, I mean, to do what I need to do, I mean, besides being an actor, I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I have a website for that. But these days, it's really easy to, there's these hosting services that give you templates for websites. That makes it really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I did with in this coronavirus period was to set up my IMDb Pro page, which also costs some money each year. But once I got the credit for a higher loyalty, I thought, okay, I think I'm ready to put myself up there with professional actors, So that was kind of fun. So if you search for me uh, on IMDb, I'll pop up, and I have a surprising number of credits. One of them, I'm wedding guest number 6. There was a film I made about a year ago where it was about this guy. It's a true story about a guy who was left quadriplegic after an accident, and it was when Kevorkian was alive and was helping people commit suicide. But one of the last things this guy did with a good friend of his was to recreate some of the pranks they did as a kid. So he asked me if I'd be willing to play the old guy who comes out of his house where they played this prank where they have a paper bag that's supposed to have excrement in it that they set on fire that he has to stamp out. So I got a credit for that film on the IMDb page as well, playing Old Man Salieri or something like that.
Do you think that's like a requirement, or like how much of a requirement is the IDMB credit?
I don't know. I mean, in a way, it's sort of a way. A lot of there's a lot of talk about branding and stuff like that now. That as an actor, you should have a website. So it's in a way, it's a way for me to create a web page for myself instead of creating a separate website. And actually, Mandy, I think, allows you to create a free website for yourself as well. If you're a paid member, one of maybe it was Casting Workbook, which is another. There's this agent that I work with. He's in Vancouver. Actually, he put out a notice maybe a year ago, looking for older talent. And we don't have actually a written agreement. He said, we'll get an agreement once you actually land you a role, which hasn't happened yet. For that, I have to be a member of Casting Workbook because the industry posts, the really professional industry posts their audition notices on Casting Workbook primarily, and the agents respond to that more than the actors. So if you're starting out, Mandy is great. That's where the non-union work is. That's actually another issue that people have to look to is when to join the union. When I got that role in higher loyalty, when I got the upgrade, that would have allowed me to join the union. And the background agency who placed me there was really surprised when I turned it down. He said, "You're the first person who's ever turned this down." Because what it means, if you're in the union and you continue to do background, you get paid almost twice as much per hour. You get overtime, time and a half, and all sorts of other, you get fed before the non-union people. Yeah. There's a bunch of perks to it. But, I said to her, I'm not really interested in pursuing a career as background. I want to be an actor. And right now, I want to be able to work in non-union projects, because once you're in the union, there's two unions. There's one for theater and one for film. If you're in the film union, you can still work in non-union theater and vice versa. But if you're in the film union, you can't work in student films are the exception. You can still work in student films, but you can't work in a low budget film, for example, which is most of the film work that I've done has been low budget films. So, so I'm waiting until I have a sufficient um, resume that I have, an agent who's really working hard to get me parts, and where I've started to make enough money from acting that makes some kind of sense. I mean, right? I don't know if it will happen. I think it will. I'm pretty optimistic, actually. I'm really delighted, actually, how this has gone the last 3 years. A little this year, it really felt like it was going to take off. I had all sorts of things lined up, and this, whole thing is delaying that. But it's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, it's a tough one this year. All right, that's our time. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and I'll catch you guys next time. This has been the Canadian Android podcast, our first episode. I hope you all join us next episode. All right.